Good afternoon, everyone. As Sebastian said, my name is Jamie Tarabay, and I'm a reporter for Bloomberg News. After 7 years in Asia and many years before that in the Middle East, I'm now based in Washington, D.C., and I cover cybersecurity. And the way that we define it is really the malicious use of tech, cyber, and AI. I want to thank Sebastian and everyone at the Paris Cyber Summit for inviting me. It's an honor to be with you all and here in this beautiful city, which is very special to me and I'm sure to so many of you. Our topic today is what impact does cybersecurity have on AI or with AI? We live in a world where hackers are not sitting around waiting for an opportunity to launch an attack. They're not waiting for a 0 day to fall into their laps, although that does happen every now and then. We live instead in one where they are constantly trawling, poking at the edges, social engineering, doing everything they can to compromise your network. As someone who, in a past life, used to report on terrorism, I think very often of a phrase I heard during those years that I believe applies here. You have to be lucky every day. They only have to be lucky once. As technology advances and proliferates, the threats to conquer them and use them for malicious means are amplified. And with artificial intelligence, that threat is multiplied to an extent that I'm not really sure we can quantify at this time. The future is here, and the hackers, whether they are cyber criminals or nation-state actors, are throwing themselves at deciphering AI with an enthusiasm that concerns pretty much everyone I talk to about this. Within some forums, we've seen white hat hackers discuss how they got ChatGPT to tell them how to steal a car. OpenAI accounts have been hacked, and hackers have demanded money from account owners to have access restored. We've seen nation-state actors from China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia using OpenAI software for research, fraud, experimenting with large language models to potentially carry out cyber attacks. And my favorite story on this topic is computer scientists affiliated with a university in Illinois demonstrated how large language models could be weaponized to compromise vulnerable websites without human guidance. Disturbingly, researchers went a step further, showing how these large language model-powered agents, especially those that are automated, can wander around the web on their own and break into web apps without any oversight. We have a brilliant panel of experts here to dig into this, as well as other ways cybersecurity and AI are interwoven, and how we can, as one of our most excellent panelists said to me yesterday, how do we use AI to work for humans and not have AI work against humanity? I'm delighted to introduce Christiane Kirketerp de Viron. She's the head of cybersecurity policy at DG Connect at European Commission. Edvardas Šileris is the head of European Cybercrime Center of Europol. Christiane Bejerasco is the CISO of WithSecure. Sandra Joyce is the vice president of Google Threat Intelligence for Google Cloud. And Gurpreet Bhatia is the principal director for cybersecurity and the deputy CISO at the US Department of Defense. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm so happy we're having this conversation. We've had iterations of it already, and I'm so excited to have everyone here involved. And hopefully you can all take something away at the end of it. Sandra, I'd like to start with you. Let's give everyone here who doesn't track this as closely as you do, like a sense of what the threat landscape in adversarial AI is like. What are you seeing right now?
Well, I think it's probably really important to separate some of the hype from reality. And so I asked our researchers to tell me exactly what is happening in the threat landscape with AI today. Not the experiments in labs, not the Terminator movie scenario, but what is actually happening. And what they came up with was we respond to about 1,300 breaches a year. That means we investigate breaches of networks of government entities, of private organizations. And we have yet to see a single incident where AI was the primary factor or the distinguishing factor of that intrusion. And that means to say that the actions taken could have been done by a human being with similar results. So there's that. But what we are seeing is some more experimentation. So if you go to the dark web today, you will see advertisements for so-called jailbreak versions of some of these chatbots, and offers for $199 a month. You can get an API access to one of these, supposedly, because these are criminals, so the extent to which they're telling the truth is dubious. And we're also seeing, and have seen for many years, the use of deep fakes, text, voice, that kind of thing. So what I like to say is that's what's happening on the red team side. That's what the threat actors are doing. I would not call that consequential yet. I would say that we have an opportunity right now to work on the defenses. And some of that is the following. So we're using AI, for example, to reverse malware faster. We have individuals who don't code in Go, for example, and they were able to use the LLMs to reverse malware to 80% accuracy, which in minutes, which would have taken quite a lot longer if we did not have that. We're using it to write YAR rules. We're using it to look at adversary smart contracts with cryptocurrency work that we're doing. So there are a lot of examples of where we're using it on defense a lot more creatively, I think, at this stage. But the sense of urgency is, in my opinion, we are only seeing the very beginning of it, and this is the moment of opportunity to leapfrog over adversaries who are using it, because their experimentation is getting better and better.
That's a really excellent point, because one of the questions that I did also have is, if it's, I don't want to say the hare and the tortoise, but like, where are we in this race? Are we behind? Are we neck and neck? And if we want to leapfrog them, like how much further would how much further would we need to jump before? Because they're doing exactly the opposite of what you're doing, and you're fighting them every day.
Well, I think the way that I think about it is that the tremendous amount of resources that go into building these large language models and AI in general, that's billions and billions of dollars of research. There are not a lot of criminal elements, let's say, that are going to be able to match that type of investment and that type of technical capability. Now, they don't need to have the full ability to harness AI to make trouble, but from a product direction, it is organizations and governments who I think are defenders and allies who have the advantage on the product direction. It is companies that are rooted in democracies that have the innovation. These are models that are mostly in English. That gives somewhat of an advantage here, but I would not rest on that to say, oh, we can let off the innovation path, because we know that China is making huge investments in this area, as are other nations that are engaging in a lot of this anti-rules-based order kind of AI activity. So I would say everybody is definitely in a race. I think defenders are right now at an advantage, but that advantage is shrinking.
To build on top of what Sandra has mentioned, actually, today, the bar for getting into AI is higher. Of course, like those NVIDIA chips cost 40,000 euros per chip, so it's definitely higher. But what we have seen with technology as well over the past 20 years is that it's costly at the beginning, and then it becomes more affordable. And the moment it becomes more affordable, more open, more democratized, then we know that the threat actors also start coming in and utilizing it. So definitely support the part where, sure, we are leading now, but it won't take too long before those then become available and then usable as well to the adversaries.
I wanted to actually stay with you, Christine, and also Gurpreet. Let's talk about guardrails. Let's talk a little bit about what's realistic, and how do we maintain the quality and the integrity of AI models while safeguarding the data. And I'm going to ask both of you if you could cite specific examples.
All right, so grounding this to the reality today, and with my role as a CISO, so we evaluate different models for utilization in the organization. We evaluate for usability, and then we evaluate for security. And what we have typically hit are not the problem with the AI, but sort of the problem of our mistakes. So let's say when it comes to data classification, how religious are we at classifying that this is confidential content, this is restricted, this is internal, this is public? I would dare say that we are not perfect with that. And for AI, I mean, whatever you have defined, it will use as that. And for instance, if you're a publicly listed company, what happens with this confidential information? How are the access controls? Are they only limited to the people who should have access to them? Because these AI models will utilize that, and if ever you have mistakes, they will amplify those mistakes. So these things that we are building now with the current model today, these are also the stuff that the future models will be building on top of. So it's definitely very valuable to take a look at the data that we feed into the AI, the training sets that we have. I mean, I know that this is not the most glamorous work when it comes to working with AI, but what you feed to it, how you define it, will define how that AI works and what type of access it has. And then afterwards, Jamie, you mentioned about AI agents. It also becomes a question of how autonomous should we let them be? Because we have seen some proof of concepts as well where you can tell an AI model, read my emails. And then it could be an attack that underneath the email, there's a text in white that a human can't read. But like in the context of an AI agent, it may be a command to perform something malicious. And then as far as the AI is concerned, it's the same. And if there's no human in the end that says, okay, go ahead with that or not, then it will autonomously proceed with that.
So 100% agree. So I always start the conversation not with all the new sexy things that are coming online, but with the fundamentals of cybersecurity, because that's what I know best. So I think what we miss a lot of times, and the way I look at AI or any other tool that's coming out today or tomorrow, how do we treat this as another tool to do our job better? Right? It's a tool and it's a mechanism, requires rigor, governance, structure, policies, training, to make sure that that ecosystem thrives. What we sometimes miss, and I 100% agree with the data challenge, right? So we don't have all of our data labeled, for instance. That's a massive undertaking to say, I'm going to label and tag every single bit of my data to control it. And that data may be the data that you use to train your models at the end of the day. So how do you control the integrity of that model at that point, right? How do you make sure that it's secure? And how do you still make it available at the end of the day? I think there was a resiliency conversation earlier in the day, right? And then the complexity is then you have multiple language models that start to learn from each other. How do you manage that ecosystem? We talk about this in the cloud world where we say, I'm going to have 5 varieties of clouds everywhere, but I don't know how the data threads across, how do we federate across, how do we secure across. So there's slightly different nuances to work there. So I think fundamentally it's a really, really good tool for cybersecurity. We're going to need it to accelerate all the things we talk about today. So I can think of easy use cases like making sure that we have good cyber hygiene across the board, right? We have good automated patching. That's really a model, automated, it's done. But we do start to worry when machines start to interact autonomously, right? And how do you control those bots to say, now I'm going to take the human out of the loop and allow machines to make a decision on my behalf and execute something really complicated, perhaps. And this goes back to a lot of the conversations we've had in the cyber domain when we talked about cyber defense versus cyber offense. Cyber offense is one of those spaces where you never make autonomous, right? You always have a decision feedback loop with a human person in the middle of it. And I think AI, for some time, is going to have a human in the middle. You're going to need to check your automated source code development, for instance. I need somebody who can validate that that's a valid source code. Simple things like if I'm downloading a language model from a public open language model, how do I ensure that there isn't a hidden executable behind that? So I think there's a lot of education, training. It's a powerful tool, but we really need to put a lot of rigor in terms of how do we consume those? How do we allow our users to interact and ask questions and deliver meaningful and correct answers? So it really goes back to the concept of how do you make them trustworthy at the end of the day? And I think a lot of that is how do you manage and monitor these capabilities? So we talk about this in cybersecurity we always talk about zero trust. Zero trust is sort of the paradigm shift that we talk about a lot, which talks about data, it talks about machines, it talks about logging and visibility across your infrastructure. All those things you need surrounding this ecosystem as well to make sure that you can counter the threats. I am confident that there are going to be new threats against this tomorrow that we are not going to even fathom today or being able to counter. But the point is that we have to have the visibility into those environments and understand anomalies along the way so we can detect and respond to them quickly. So I think that's sort of what's missing for now. And I think within at least the space we are in, we're starting to experiment. And this is not at scale at this point, at least for us. We're starting to figure out how to build those pilots in a way that allow you to scale. So how do you have common interfaces that allow you to do centralized monitoring, for instance? How do you have a centralized model inference? So I think there's a series of things that we're trying to do that provide and deliver a service across the board for all of our users, but allow the users to then figure out how do they have domain-specific language models that allow them to do their job. And same thing in cybersecurity. So we're trying to figure out sort of how to roll that out in cybersecurity.
I hope that when you do decide to talk about your experiments, you come to me. I wanted to just go back on what you were saying in terms of building trust. What would you suggest as first steps? What would that look like?
So there's two parts to that, right? One is really the part about trusting the capability and technology. So it is the application, the APIs, the model, the interaction, right? So there's a trust component to that. And then there's the second part is how much as a individual or as an employee do you trust that capability to deliver or deliver you an answer, right? So I think the trustworthiness part of generate an automated email for hiring somebody, pretty low threshold. I think we can do that pretty well. But when we say detect malware, automate response combined with many other threat vectors, I think we start to, I think we're not in a space where we can automatically kind of say, hey, we're going to trust it. But I think we're going to find the power and the speed and the connection it makes, and then having somebody eye it. And I think that will slowly, as that starts to develop an answer. So if you start with the lower level functions like cyber hygiene and all the other things I talked about, you can start to build trust and confidence in the capability. So we can also use it for things like, hey, we've had a breach. Can we do a damage assessment? Basically pulling all your data together and run AI tools to figure out what you have lost and what the value of that information is. So I think all those measures are going to start to build a trust in how you deploy these tools. But I think initially they're going to be very purpose-driven, and then over time they will expand.
Edvardas, I want to talk to you about law enforcement and the role of law enforcement in being able to sort of enforce a lot of this, and how does jurisdiction come into play, and how far away are we from being able to sort of properly protect, and how are you? What are the ways that you're finding challenging in being able to do your job?
Thank you. Good and really wide question. Actually, aligned with previous speakers that actually for time being we don't see AI as a threat for tomorrow. Maybe in few years it will become as daily business. But for time being, what we see is that actually there is plenty of social engineering used by malicious AI, or I don't know, maybe not malicious, but same AI in different purpose, generating of deepfakes. For sure, they become more and more accessible and really convincing. So without special equipment, you will not be capable to detect. In the end of the day, it's so far it's not machine to machine, it's human machine to human actually. So that's why in the end of the day, behind keyboard is human being, and who is under attack is also human being. But machines or AI tools, it's really lowering bar or lowering threshold to automatize many things. And if in the past it was relatively complicated, in the beginning we saw that ransomware as a service or cybercrime as a service involved. Right now it seems that AI as a service is involving, and it seems that without almost non-technical knowledge, actually you can really generate huge losses, damages, etc. And I think trust, what will be the mostly challenged currency, if I could name it in this way, within society, because for time being, if I get phone call or some image, I trust by default. And in the future, probably I will be forced not to trust. Second thing, role of law enforcement itself, what you have asked. So it means that for time being, cybersecurity or security community, they took care about how to patch everything as soon as possible, how to protect, how to prevent, but not how to investigate. And I agree that in the past years, we achieved some successes in some different well-known cases, but still actually I think that time frame is not in favor of ours. So it means that if average investigation of a ransomware attack is between 1 or 2 years or 3 years sometimes, it's not good response time. When launch this kind of attack takes minutes or sometimes, okay, days. So this one, I think that we as society, we should find ways how to foresee role of law enforcement, what society expects from law enforcement, and the main thing for law enforcement, I would say, is data. So actually how we can access data. Because for time being, in many cases, we are fighting, we are trying to find loops, legal loops, how to get to this data, how to fulfill our duties. And sometimes, honestly, law enforcement feels a bit threatened that we are becoming bad guys who are demanding data. So it means that we are demanding how to fulfill our duties properly. So this one, I think that especially with the rise of AI, because probably, actually, I think that wave of cybercrime will expand dramatically, because for time being, Lockbit, for example, most known ransomware family, okay, 2,000 victims. It's globally, it's nothing really dramatically, but if you face 2 million victims, and here supply chain comes in place, because for time being the main vector of attack is supply chain, no matter that I am protected well, if Christine is not protected actually, and these criminals will come to me through her. So same with AI. So for example, you can double check, you can triple check your AI model, but if these AI models will rely on each other, and then actually all ecosystem will become vulnerable. So here I think that there are many unknown questions for time being. It's a bit look to the future, but I think that we should start thinking about it.
You know, on Lockbit, I think that it was really sort of celebrated as a really significant accomplishment of international collaboration. And I think that the question for you about in terms of data sharing and intelligence sharing, how do we, is this, I think the question that I had for you before, is this a one-off? Are we never going to see its like again? With the threats being amplified and the stakes higher as we go forward, if you're sort of hamstrung in data sharing, even with domestic partners, do you think that's an area where international partners can help? I'm curious about the inability for you to be able to use data for your investigations, and if you can sort of, if you could choose how you resolve the situation, what would be your preference? You don't have to name anyone if you don't want to.
Maybe here, few things to be mentioned. I'm optimist in AI, so I think that actually it will feed gap of technical knowledge within law enforcement. So actually I think that will be able to do much more. Europol itself, actually, we are EU agency, and our mandate is 2 or more countries involved. So it means that if it's pure local activity, it's but matter of national authorities and not ourselves. So I think that it will be scaled somehow, not through maybe Europol, but actually that all the victims will have similar assistance. Third thing that for time being, because of this accessibility of data and more or less everything in internet right now is encrypted, that law enforcement itself, actually, we rely on vulnerabilities. And this vulnerabilities market was created not intentionally by states, by security companies, etc. And for time being, we lost bit confidence how to assist particular victim. So we have started to targeted phenomena. So it means that actually right now, main focus of law enforcement is not victim A, B, or C. Actually, it's ransomware family. It's our main target group. But actually, if one victim would come to law enforcement, probably they will be guided to cybersecurity company and to say, actually, look, it's private companies, they know how to deal with this cyber incident. As they called, actually, we as human beings, we are really creative with vocabulary. So instead of crime, we developed a new word, cyber incident. So it means that cyber incident is not crime. No, nevertheless, everyone knows that 99% is crime. So that's why I think that law enforcement lost little bit ability of fulfill duties properly, bit of different vocabulary, and bit that business went to one direction and law enforcement, we stayed on the same stage, I would say. So probably some changes will be needed one way or another, and I'm quite positive about it. And I hope that more and more victims will get support from law enforcement as well. And from cybersecurity companies, or they will never be attacked.
Christiane, I wanted to ask if you could speak to regulations and agility around regulations, especially when we still don't know what we're dealing with in the future. Like, how do we craft laws and regulations and guidelines that they're agile enough to evolve with the tech?
Yeah, thank you. So it's actually very nice to be invited to talk about legislative techniques because it's something that we work a lot on, obviously. I would say that for what concerns AI, but you can also apply it much more widely on technology, of course, it is a field that's evolving at very high speed. And therefore, subsequently, we also have to make sure that when we put in place rules, that they're actually designed for this. And I think if you're looking at both the AI Act, but also the Cyber Resilience Act, for instance, it is actually two types of legislation that have built into them the capacity to address such an evolving technology, because it's, first of all, it's risk-based. It's technology neutral. It sets out requirements that would need to be met, for instance, for high-risk products. But at the same time, we also build into these acts the ability to actually come with secondary legislation, to come with guidelines, to do additional elements as technology evolves. And that's, I think, the key thing. It is that when we're regulating such technologies, whether it's for AI trustworthiness and safety, or whether it's for cybersecurity, that we make the frameworks flexible enough to actually also stand the test of time. And that's what we have been doing, both with the AI Act, but certainly also with the Cyber Resilience Act. Then I think when you're looking at, how are we using AI, for instance, in our critical infrastructure, it's going to be a big thing. And here as well, you can actually look at our NIS2 framework, so our framework for cybersecurity in the critical entities, because it follows the same logic again. We're saying, if you're an entity, you have to protect the security, you have to ensure the security of your network and information systems. And then we don't really talk too much about what kind of threats we're looking at, because NIS2, and this is sometimes a surprise to a lot of people, it's actually not only about cybersecurity, it's also about protecting your network information system against snowfalls. It's also physical hazards that you need to protect against. So it is about the integrity of your systems. And of course, in that context as well, AI security becomes very relevant. So I think as we move forward, there's also going to be an interesting conversation to have around how do we make sure that all our critical entities, when they're adopting AI, that they're actually doing it in a secure way. And again, I don't have to go and amend anything. The frameworks are already there, because the way that they have been designed to make sure that new technologies, new developments fit in. And I think when we're looking at, I actually also like the conversation we're having here, because there's a lot of people saying, well, AI, we don't really see it yet. Yeah, but we see in other sectors that when it's there, it disrupts and it goes fast. So it's also, we can sit here and have this discussion because it's not in the rear mirror yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not coming at us at high speed. And that's certainly something that I think we all need to get ready for.
Do you feel confident with where you are in terms of mapping that out?
I mean, it's interesting because I think when it comes to adversarial AI, when it comes to secure use of AI, I mean, we're still evolving. We're having conversations with industry. We're having conversation with our international partners. What are we seeing? A lot of it, our predictions, it's still research. So I think if I look at what we think is coming, so the known unknowns and the known knowns, I would say I feel quite comfortable that we have a good framework. But at the same time, I think we also just need to be ready to adapt very quickly. And I think actually there are many things that we can learn from how we have been working on cybersecurity in terms of, situational awareness of information sharing and all, the thing we do on cybersecurity. I think there are many things from that you can actually also draw over to AI security and security of AI and say, well, should we look at having, this kind of mechanisms put in place also on AI?
Okay, I feel like I have to sort of recall a story that this is, I mean, everyone here is a very serious person and you're all very dedicated to securing environments and networks and societies. I want to ask a question about the willingness of AI companies to embrace cybersecurity as a priority. And what is the general experience so far? And what message can we send AI companies who are focused on the race to create the next new AI model and not giving enough importance to the possible loss of IP or the risk of networks not being properly defended? And of course, what happens when an adversary gets a hold of your LLM? We're talking on background. I had a conversation with a senior US official, and in his conversations with AI companies, whenever he raised the question of cyber and protecting the networks, the response was always, that's a cyber thing. And those things I feel should kind of go hand in hand, especially when there's so much money being poured into R&D and that race to be first. And the means to protect that aren't in parallel. So I'm going to put that to all of you.
I'll take a crack at it. So I think from our perspective, one, just working backwards from the industry side, way we consume information or technology or capabilities, we have our own rigorous testing process to bring things in-house. So we're probably perceived as pretty slow to adopt, but we also have a rigor in adopting those capabilities, and that is cloud technology or any other technology. So there's a whole testing, approval, validation schema before we integrate capabilities into our infrastructure. In terms of driving industry, I think our conversation with them really is about how do you build integrity into your model? How do you ensure the confidentiality? But that's a two-part equation, right? That's for us to do internally in our infrastructure and for them to offer those services. And then availability is also something we look for, having the flexibility to make sure that we can make those things available as we see fit. And part of that is also, as we consume all these capabilities, our job is to test all those components out. So I think we tend to rely on our own auspices more than we want industry to really drive, but we certainly want them to think about how to do sophisticated malware detection within their language models. So if we're importing a model, we want to understand how do you do deep checking on your model to make sure that we're importing safe models. And then there's the aggregation of models problem. I think, again, we live in a probably more closed ecosystem, so we tend to be very cautious in bringing things in. But when things are inside, be it a pilot or be at scale, we want to make sure that we're able to monitor those capabilities and look for anomalies. So our guidance to industry, I think writ large, is secure your models, secure your applications, secure your APIs. But we're looking for industry to be that innovator and adopter and bring that to us. We're not necessarily great at innovating all that stuff. We can tell you through risk management framework, what are the controls that you need, but we don't want to dictate how that implementation happens. We're looking for industry to really take that ownership.
So this is the perspective of an AI company, right, Google, but I have a little bit of an advantage with this question because I'm the cybersecurity company that was bought by Google. Mandiant was bought by Google almost 2 years ago for over $5 billion to really signal the way that they're taking cybersecurity seriously. And Mandiant works hand in hand with our Google, within Google to work on the safety of LLMs. And the commitment to security, I think, has been strong in Google for a while. If you remember, many years ago, the sort of famous hack of Google, you can go on YouTube and see Hacking Google. It's a whole, several-part series on China's hacking of Google in, I believe, 2011. And that was really a turning point for Google.
Can you talk a little bit about the hack?
Yeah, of course. So I wasn't there, so I've learned about it like the rest of you. But basically, China was caught hacking into Google's infrastructure. And it was a moment where Google had to reassess its entire posture on security. Now, this is many, many years ago. And from this incident came Secure by Design and the whole idea of how we were going to repackage and relook at our network, at our security, which is why when you close a Chromebook, there's nothing on it. It's basically, you close it, it's gone. So if I leave it somewhere, I'm not that worried about it. So I think that's the signaling that Google did by buying Mandiant, but also the shaping that does. So everything that Mandiant is doing for cybersecurity purposes, the threat intelligence that we are applying, go back into Google products for detection and for security. And we are taking a special emphasis right now on looking at the security of LLMs in general. Because I think that the thing that concerns me is how are we going to know if an LLM is compromised? If you think about the vast number of computations that are involved in the weighting, and I'm not a deep expert in this area, but how will we know that some small change has been made to create different outcomes? And how will we defend against it? And how will we guarantee the integrity of it? I think our CEO said it best. He came to Paris, last year and talked about the need for regulation, which I think some people were very surprised to hear. But I think that there was a very important message in what he said, which is basically, to paraphrase, we need to be hand in hand with civil society, with government, with the people, because this technology is too important for one company to do it. And I think that is the right attitude and position to have, because this really is the technology that will underpin the future. So in that way, Google is taking cybersecurity really seriously and has for a while.
So perhaps in the context of a cybersecurity company, so WithSecure is a cybersecurity company, and the learnings that we have had over the past few decades, specifically the last 2 decades, was that we are quite good at predicting technology uses, but quite bad at predicting misuses. And therefore, how do we sort of enable or maybe even regulate quite a bit of these AI organizations to be flexible when it comes to when the misuses come into play? How do we sort of revisit? How do we refactor these technologies so that it won't be the same as the problems that we have had before? Because whenever our current technologies that has been invented in the past few years, whenever they were misused, we have typically been playing catch up with cyber criminals. And that is something that's very hard to sort of detect immediately in the context of AI, but perhaps embedding this flexibility into the model, such that, for instance, it's transparent where this information was gathered from. It's auditable, for instance. And therefore, when there's already something that's going wrong, then it can be flexibly changed. I know this is easier said than done from a technological perspective, but we have companies that can sort of move mountains with the budgets that they have. And if we really want to be committed to AI being used for good and curbing the malicious side of it as soon as we see it, then we need to bake flexibility into the system.
Maybe just to add a few things, technology by default is neutral, so that's why actually for sure it will be abused. And I would love to see 100% security, but probably with all the regulations, with good practice, we will achieve maturity, but actually we will not achieve that. There will be no crimes, there will be no abuse of AI tools as well. Probably for closed systems, it will be less risky because actually you can double check, triple check, etc. But when we reach stage when we start to interconnect services, publicly available services, probably the risk will raise dramatically. So I think that we should be ready for this. We should start thinking and discussing about that, and especially when we introduce new services, because this general rule which applies to business, everything is allowed, what is not prohibited, actually sometimes generates really innovative ideas, but also poses some risks as well. So I think that some balance is needed.
I find it in a way shocking but not surprising to hear what you said about security being something we think about afterwards. I think if we're looking, I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, whenever things move fast, we have also seen that security is like maybe something we do at the end. And it was the whole reason why we actually went for a Cyber Resilience Act, because we knew that for certain technologies, especially, the time to get it placed on the market was just more important than the security of, in a way, your clients. We're hoping that, and I would say I'm quite optimistic, that with Cyber Resilience Act, with security by design being mandatory, that it's not just about regulation, it's also about a culture shift within companies, and that will of course also affect AI systems. AI systems that are sold as products are anyways covered, but I think there will be a change within companies. I think there will also be a change as we see the threat environment evolve, as we see government being more focused on procuring secure solutions, as we see critical entities having supply chain requirements. So there is, you know, if it's not maybe coming necessarily from those developing it, it will be also coming from the market. There is a requirement, a much stronger requirement for actually getting products that are secure. So, I mean, I would say going forward, hopefully, we will see some changes as well.
That does give me a little bit of confidence, because as Gurpreet sort of suggested, like, you all will do the due diligence if they don't. And that reminds me a lot of cyber insurance these days, you know, that there has to be quality control and compliance and sort of not even like the bare minimum standards, but if you want cyber insurance, show that you've done everything you can to be able to take it out, right?
Can I ask? So I think one of the things we don't talk about, since in cybersecurity, we don't talk about safety a lot. So I think there's an aspect of safety of AI that we don't talk about. So we talk about cybersecurity from biases, manipulation, supply chain. There are lots of risks in cybersecurity, but we don't talk about the implications of what do you do when you get a wrong answer and there's a real implication at the end of the day, right? So if I'm a CISO, for instance, am I liable at that point for a AI system that generated a response which caused further damage or another incident? So I think we don't talk about that safety part of the equation. We don't talk about how do you safeguard these systems to generate within some norms standardized answers, right? So we haven't characterized a lot of these systems as we have a lot of other systems. So we know how firewalls behave. We know how intrusion detection systems behave. A lot of the perimeter stuff we know how to do really, really well. But as we move closer to the user and the endpoint, we quite haven't figured out the implications of AI as that reach for the cybersecurity side will get to the endpoint, and then the user will interact at that endpoint with a autonomous mechanism to generate outcomes, and it may actually have impact on my cybersecurity outcomes at the end of the day. So I think we need to really think about sort of a couple of sides of this equation. And just on the cybersecurity side, I wanted to also mention that we're also in a state where we're starting to look at how do we assess this capability. So we red team and we hunt and we do a lot of this stuff. I think so we have actually kicked off an effort, a bug bounty, to look at biases within AI systems. So I think that's the kind of cooperation we really need with industry and across the board, across allies as well, to make sure that we understand the characteristics of what we're dealing with and how to make it interoperable and work at speed and scale that we need it to work at.
I actually wanted to bring Edvardas in terms of when it comes to social responsibility. What would law enforcement like to see from companies?
Good question, actually, is to be social responsible. So it means that actually it's not only business driven, and I think that we at Europol, we found quite good balance between social responsibility and profits for private companies. We have 3 advisory groups when they step in and they sometimes guide law enforcement where to go, what to do, and actually because in many cases they have a bit better visibility than law enforcement. But in the end of the day, it's not as big brother who wants to take off your data as law enforcement. We don't actually. It's part of social responsibility. So actually we should reach agreement what you expect from law enforcement, and we should find proper balance. What kind of tools do we need to achieve it, but not actually do some magic. Actually, probably no one believes in magic and fairy tales. So it means that actually it should be clear principle, and from these principles we need to achieve proper results. So social responsibility for me in this way, but also here I'm a bit skeptic that actually regulation is needed. Because based on voluntary things, unfortunately everyone, not everyone, but majority finds a lot of excuse not to do it. So here I think that this access to data discussion, sometimes it's, okay, in one side is law enforcement, and second side part is privacy advocates. Okay, privacy by design. Sometimes I referring privacy is not anonymity, so it means that actually victims also have rights to be supported, and if we as society reject it, actually, so we are a bit, I don't know, it's a good society to be in this way. So that's why social responsibility is needed. It's not that everything will be monitored, but actually legitimate access to data is crucial for law enforcement. And one way or another, I think, as society, we should find proper balance how to achieve it.
I'm actually curious, related to law enforcement. It reminds me a little bit of the movie Minority Report. I don't know if anybody in the audience has watched it. Is that, yes, is that sort of like a, what if artificial intelligence and the police sort of like work together? Would that look like Tom Cruise in the Minority Report, or is it an
Exactly
ideal
like
state?
Tom Cruise.
Actually, I have one point here, actually, AI forensics, at least. Actually, I'm not sure that actually police will be equal to AI, but some things for sure will be capable, will be possible to automatize. Okay. But I don't think that actually it will happen in the nearest future. Right. So probably we will be far, far in retirement.
I don't know. Does anyone have any questions? Or is everyone in a food coma after lunch? I think everyone is in a food coma after lunch. Does anyone have any final thoughts or comments they want to share?
I'm going to quote my friend Mark in the back. He said something yesterday that I think is worth repeating, and that is that everybody looks around and says, well, somebody needs to do something about this. And somebody is really doing a bad job, because we're not actually probably coming together, because the person who should be doing something about it, look in the mirror, right? Even if you're a private citizen, if you have a small business, make sure you're not on default password so that the Chinese are not abusing orb networks and using, Soho routers. Or, if you're a business, make sure you have your cybersecurity hygiene done. If you're a government, I think the people are getting fed up with the amount of theft and sabotage of their systems and organizations. So when everybody's asking somebody should do something, it's actually we are, all of us individually, supposed to be doing something right now. Thank you, Mark.
Totally echo that. It's all about cybersecurity all the time. So I think it's really about the fundamentals. So if we really look at, again, as I've begun the conversation, this is another mechanism and another tool in our tool chest. But if we have processes, governance, a secure, cybersecure infrastructure already in place that allows us to have the visibility and access control and data monitoring, this is a very incredibly powerful tool that we can use, and it'll scale up over time. So I think it's really important to take heed to those things as foundational building blocks. And if we have those building blocks right, we can use AI or the next thing that's going to come tomorrow after AI. So I would say focus on cybersecurity. And it starts with just the cyber hygiene. If you can get cyber hygiene right, we're well on our way.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking our amazing panel, Gurpreet, Sandra, Christine, Edvardas, and Christiane. Thank you so much for coming out today. Appreciate it.